Why is it that the people who don't chase attention often end up becoming the most magnetic in the room? This video is titled, Why Being Detached and Non-Reactive Makes You More Attractive. Not as a theory, but as a quiet truth you've probably sensed but never fully named. In a world where most people are loud, reactive, and constantly seeking approval, the person who remains calm, detached, and intentional stands out, not by force but by presence. Detachment doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care deeply, but not about things that cost your inner peace. And being non-reactive doesn't make you weak. It makes you someone others instinctively respect because you're not controlled by emotion, but guided by clarity. If you've ever felt exhausted trying to impress people or drained from reacting to every little thing, then this is the reset your mind needs. Watch it slowly, then listen again later. Let each idea sink in, not just once, but daily. And if any part speaks to you, share it in the comments. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs today. Don't forget to subscribe, so you never miss a moment that could change how you lead, think, and show up in the world. One calm is what makes you unforgettable. In a room full of voices, where everyone is trying to be heard, cutting in, talking over one another, rushing to prove something, there's always that one person who doesn't compete. They sit quietly, not because they have nothing to say, but because they don't need to prove anything. No forced charm, no need to dominate, just presence. And somehow they draw more attention than the loudest person there. That's not a tactic. That's not an attitude. That's power. The kind of power that doesn't ask to be seen, but becomes impossible to ignore. Calm is not passivity. It is a strength under control. And in today's overstimulated world, it has become one of the rarest, most magnetic qualities a person can embody. While most chase validation, others try to impress through noise or reaction. The calm individual steps back and instantly stands out. I once took an Uber ride I'll never forget, not because of the destination, but because of the energy of the driver. No loud music, no idle small talk, just steady hands, precise turns, effortless focus. When traffic slowed, he didn't sigh. When another car cut in, he didn't react. His stillness created a sense of safety I couldn't quite explain. I don't remember his face, I don't know his name, but I remember how I felt around him. Stable, grounded, calm. That's the kind of presence that lingers. Not because it asked to be remembered, but because it left no chaos behind. In that silence, there was clarity. In his calm, there was quiet strength, and it stuck with me. This is the essence of what it means to develop a non-reactive mindset. It doesn't require a stage, it doesn't need applause. It simply holds firm when others shake. You become that still center in a world that spins fast and frantically, and that's why calmness is unforgettable. When people look back at their day, they won't recall every word spoken, but they will remember how someone made them feel. And if you were the one who didn't flinch, didn't over-explain, didn't let the moment hijack your peace, you're the one they remember. The Stoics understood this long before the modern world turned noise into currency. They taught that real power comes from within, from emotional discipline, from letting go of things you cannot control. But today, emotional control is often mistaken for detachment, or worse, weakness. It's not. The ability to stay calm in chaos, to maintain your center when provoked, is what sets apart the grounded from the reactive. In fact, Stoic energy presence isn't about looking unbothered. It's about being truly unbothered because you no longer seek permission from the outside world to feel whole. You move through your day with quiet confidence, and that confidence speaks louder than anything you could say. In everyday life, we constantly witness how those who are calm attract more. Not because they ask for attention, but because they create contrast. In a meeting where everyone is quick to react, the one who pauses before responding, who takes a breath before they speak, immediately commands more weight. In relationships, the person who listens more than they argue becomes a source of stability. Even in conflict, silence can be your strength, not as a weapon, but as a way of choosing where your energy goes. You don't have to mirror the chaos around you. You can choose to be still. You can train that stillness until it becomes second nature. And when it does, people will feel something different when they're around you, even if they can't name it. That feeling? That's the energy of calm. That's your presence doing the speaking. And that's what makes you unforgettable, too. The quiet one speaks loudest. There's a strange kind of silence that doesn't go unnoticed. Not the awkward kind, but the intentional one. Picture this. You're sitting at a dinner table, laughter bouncing off the walls, stories overlapping, voices rising to outdo one another. It's chaos, but a familiar kind. The kind we've all seen at parties, in meetings, on social media. And then someone leans in, not to shout, but to speak just one sentence, softly. The table goes quiet, not out of force, but respect. That's presence. That's timing. That's power. Because when everyone is trying to be loud, the one who knows when to speak stands out more than the rest. It's not about being shy. It's not about being passive. It's about being deliberate. And that's something very few people train for in today's world. We're told to market ourselves constantly, to stay visible, to never let silence fill the room. But sometimes, silence is exactly what gives your voice its weight. I remember a guy in my public speaking class who hardly spoke. Week after week, he sat in the back, listening. No interruptions, no side comments. Then came his turn to present. He stood up, no slides, no fancy gestures. Just spoke for 3 minutes, and every word landed like it had been carved in stone. People leaned in. Even the instructor stopped taking notes. Why? Because he didn't speak until he had something worth saying. And when he did, it felt earned. In that moment, the quietest person in the room had the loudest voice, not by volume, but by impact. That kind of speaking comes from emotional control techniques and deep inner clarity. It's the voice of someone who doesn't react impulsively, who doesn't waste breath trying to sound important. They speak with intention, and intention is rare. In the Stoic worldview, restraint is not weakness, it's mastery. The person who can sit through noise, through pressure, through chaos, and still choose their words carefully is the one others instinctively trust. Why? Because they're not trying to impress. They're not racing to be heard. They're observing. They're grounded. And in a world of noise, that kind of quiet confidence power feels like a revelation. There's something deeply magnetic about someone who doesn't rush to reply, who doesn't interrupt to insert their opinion, who can hold a pause without panicking. It's a sign that they're not led by anxiety or the need to perform. They're led by presence. And presence is not something you can fake. In your daily life, you'll start to notice how rare this is. In conversations, the loudest voice usually gets the floor, but rarely gets remembered. The person who listens, who absorbs, who waits and then speaks from depth, that's the one who shapes the room. You don't need to speak constantly to influence. You need to know when to speak and why. This is especially powerful in leadership. The manager who says less but means more, the colleague who only speaks when it matters, the friend who listens more than they advise, those are the people we look to in uncertain moments. Because when they speak, we feel the stability behind their words. We sense the strength in their silence. And that kind of clarity doesn't come from noise, it comes from stillness. So if you've ever felt like your quiet nature is a disadvantage, it's not. It's your edge. In a room full of shouting, the softest voice with a clear point becomes the anchor. If you've trained yourself to stay calm, to hold back when everyone else rushes forward, you've already begun building a kind of magnetic stillness that pulls people in. And once people feel that, they don't forget it. Because when the noise fades, what echoes isn't volume, it's truth. And often, the one who speaks last is the one who leaves the deepest mark. 3. You don't need to be seen to have value. There's a quiet kind of value that doesn't scream for attention, and yet, it holds everything together. It's the kind of value that doesn't trend, doesn't post about itself, doesn't ask to be recognized, but when it's not there, everything feels off. In a world built on visibility, likes, followers, performance, it's easy to believe that your worth is tied to how often you're noticed. But that belief is hollow. Some of the strongest or most grounded people walk through life like shadows, present, necessary, and irreplaceable, but never needing the spotlight to validate their presence. That's not invisibility. That's quite a strength. And it's often those people, the ones who don't need to be seen, who are remembered the most when things fall apart. I once went on a camping trip with a group of friends. You had the loud ones, the planners, the performers, the people who posted updates every few hours, the ones with the big gestures. And then there was this one guy. No fanfare. He didn't take selfies by the fire or joke loudly over meals. But while others were showing up for the camera, he was quietly making things work. Refilling water jugs, clearing out trash, making sure there were snacks left for later. He didn't say much and he didn't complain. Honestly, I barely noticed him during the first few days. But by the end of the trip, when we all sat down to talk about what we appreciated, almost everyone mentioned him. Not because he took up space, but because he held things together. And we all knew it. That's what it means to have a value that's not broadcast but deeply felt. In the context of Stoic attraction secrets, this kind of presence becomes magnetic in a different way. It's not about charisma or charm, it's about solidity. When someone consistently shows up, not for applause, not for recognition, but simply because that's who they are, people begin to sense that grounded energy. And in a world where so many people chase approval and shrink without it, being whole on your own is rare. That's what draws others to you without you trying. You don't need a loud voice to command attention. You just need to be consistent, reliable, and inwardly strong. The kind of person who does the right thing when no one's watching is the kind of person people turn to when it matters. What most don't realize is that true presence doesn't need visibility. It's felt in how others respond to you, not in words, but in energy. People feel safe around someone who isn't reactive, who doesn't demand the room but anchors it. This is a Stoic energy presence in motion, detached from ego, free from the need to be seen, but full of quiet self-respect. That self-respect doesn't require performance. It's built from inner standards, from knowing what you bring, even when no one claps for it. And the irony is this: the more you detach from the need to be noticed, the more noticeable you become. Not because you're flashy, but because you offer something others can lean on: steadiness. In teams, in friendships, in relationships, the ones who stay grounded are often the ones people trust the most. So when you feel overlooked, pause before assuming you don't matter. Ask yourself, am I building my worth on perception or on presence? Because once you know your value doesn't live in the spotlight, you stop chasing it. And when you stop chasing, you start radiating something stronger, something solid, calm, and quietly powerful. That's the kind of value the world remembers. Not always loudly, but always for real. 4. A quiet no builds real respect. There's a moment we've all lived through. Someone asks for your time, your help, your presence. And though every part of you wants to decline, your mouth forms a yes before your brain even catches up. You walk away with a smile on your face and resentment in your chest. Not because the request was wrong, but because your answer wasn't honest. Over time, those small betrayals of yourself pile up. You begin to lose pieces of your peace. And yet there's a quiet shift that happens the first time you say no, calmly, clearly, and without guilt. Not out of anger, not to prove anything. Just because you've started to honor your own boundaries. That moment becomes a turning point, not just in how you feel, but in how people begin to treat you. I remember the first time I said no to a late meeting. I didn't make excuses. I just said, I don't take work calls after 8 p.m. The silence that followed felt heavy, almost awkward. But something powerful happened. I didn't apologize, and no one asked twice. At first, I was afraid they'd think I wasn't committed, but what actually happened was the opposite. They adjusted. That quiet no didn't close a door, it built a boundary. One that made it clear, I respect my time, and I expect you to do the same. Boundaries like that aren't walls, they're signals. They let people know what you value without needing to raise your voice. In the context of emotional control techniques, this form of calm resistance is a tool of mastery. Anyone can say no with frustration. Anyone can lash out when they've had enough. But saying no before you reach that breaking point, that takes inner discipline. That takes clarity. And clarity is one of the rarest strengths in today's distracted world. When you know what you stand for, you no longer feel pressured to explain it. You don't owe a monologue. You don't need to soften the blow. A simple no said with certainty is often more powerful than any long justification. And that's why it earns respect, not just from others, but from yourself. I had a close friend who became known for one simple rule: no phone calls after 9 p.m. No exceptions. At first, people were annoyed, but over time, everyone adapted. Because consistency creates trust. People stopped expecting him to answer late messages, and they respected him more for it. His boundary became part of his presence, predictable, steady, unshakable. That's the core of a non-reactive mindset. It's not about isolating yourself. It's about choosing when and how to engage, so you don't spend your energy reacting to everything that tugs at your attention. The people who live this way don't burn out. They build lasting influence because their presence feels intentional. In a world where so many are afraid to disappoint, the ability to say no without fear is revolutionary. Not because it makes you difficult, but because it makes you real. You stop saying yes just to be liked. You stop stretching yourself thin to earn approval. You start protecting the space that allows you to grow, to rest, to think clearly. And that space, guarded by quiet boundaries, is what allows you to show up fully when it does matter. The truth is, no one respects someone who's always available, always agreeable, always bending. But we all respect the one who knows their limits, honors them gently, and never lets the world pull them too far from themselves. That's the kind of presence that builds trust. Not loud, not cold, just clear. And in clarity, there is always quiet strength. 5. Silence is the smartest counterattack. There's a kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from work or lack of sleep. It comes from trying to win arguments that don't matter, from reacting to people who were never listening in the first place. You walk away drained, not because you lost the exchange, but because you gave away too much of your energy defending something that didn't need defending. Silence, in those moments, isn't weakness. It's a strategy. It's clarity. It's choosing to protect your peace instead of proving a point. I once watched two coworkers clash over a minor report error. One shouted, insisting, "I'm not wrong." His voice echoed across the room. The other remained calm, simply replied, "I understand. Let's review it after the break," and walked away. That second person didn't flinch. He didn't fight. And later, when the manager made a decision, it was clear who held more trust. He hadn't reacted. He had responded with silence and self-control. In that moment, he didn't lose power. He gained it. In a world where reaction is mistaken for strength, silence can feel like surrender. But silence used with intention is one of the most powerful forms of emotional self-control you can develop. It disrupts the rhythm of confrontation. It changes the pace. While others rush to defend their ego, the silent one keeps their footing. They become the cliff that waves crash against, unmoved, unshaken. That stillness, that ability to pause, is what separates a non-reactive mindset from emotional volatility. You don't respond because you have nothing to say. You respond with silence because what you say must matter, or it's not worth saying at all. And the less you react, the more unpredictable you become. People don't know what bothers you. They don't know how to push your buttons. That's power. The mistake many make is believing that every challenge requires a reply. But the truth is, most confrontations are invitations into someone else's chaos. When you accept the invitation, you start playing by their rules. You match their volume, mirror their defensiveness, and before long, you've lost yourself trying to win a game that never had real stakes. But silence changes that dynamic. It forces the other person to confront their own noise. It reveals their emotional instability, while yours remains intact. The strongest person in the room is rarely the one speaking. It's the one who could speak but chooses not to. The one who resists the impulse to prove something. That's the essence of magnetic stillness. It's not passive, it's deliberate. It's the calm force that makes others question themselves, not because you made them, but because your silence left them alone with their own echo. Silence doesn't mean you walk away from everything. It means you choose your battles and how you fight them. Sometimes saying nothing is the smartest move, not because you're afraid to engage, but because you know exactly what engaging will cost, and you've decided your peace isn't for sale. The people who earn respect in the long run are not the ones who yell the loudest or type the fastest response. They're the ones who make others think twice before coming at them. Not out of fear, but out of awareness. Because nothing is more unnerving than facing someone who doesn't flinch, who doesn't get baited, who remains still even when the room gets loud. If you want to gain influence without aggression, learn to pause. When someone says something designed to provoke you, don't rush to reply. Let it sit. Let them feel the silence. Because in that space, you take back control. And once you've mastered that, people will sense it, even when you say nothing at all. That's not a retreat. That's presence. That's poise. That's your mind, choosing peace over performance. And that's the smartest counterattack you'll ever make. 6. What you hold back creates the mystery. There's something strangely compelling about the person who doesn't overshare. You sit across from them, maybe at a coffee shop or during a casual group conversation, and while others are filling the air with stories and opinions, they remain still, listening, watching, occasionally nodding. Then they ask a simple question. Why does that matter to you? No judgment, no interruption, just presence. And somehow, in that one moment, you find yourself rethinking everything you just said. They didn't say much, but they made you think more deeply than anyone else in the room. That's not charisma. That's depth. And depth doesn't come from saying everything. It comes from knowing what not to say. In a world that rewards constant output, the ability to withhold, to protect parts of yourself, has become rare. And that rarity is exactly what creates mystery. We've been conditioned to believe that visibility equals value. The more you share, the more real you are. But sometimes the most magnetic people are the ones who give just enough to keep you curious. They don't pretend, they're just not performing. And that lack of performance draws people in. It's not silence for silence's sake. It's emotional self-mastery. It's knowing that not everything needs to be voiced, and that restraint isn't repression. It's power, a quiet kind. The kind that grows in stillness and shows itself not through display, but through presence. And that presence makes people lean in, not because you ask them to, but because they can't quite figure you out. You see this in work settings all the time. There's always someone who talks first in every meeting, someone who dominates every thread, someone who reacts to every minor issue. Then there's the one who waits, takes notes, and only speaks when it matters. When they do, the room shifts. Not because they said more, but because they said less. And what they held back made everything they did say carry more weight. That's quiet confidence power at work. It's not about being passive or disconnected. It's about being intentional. People often think they need to reveal their every thought, every detail, to be understood. But real understanding often comes not from volume, but from clarity. And clarity thrives in the spaces you choose not to fill. Even in relationships, mystery isn't about playing games. It's about keeping a part of your world sacred. Not because you're hiding, but because you've built something inside that doesn't depend on constant validation. You've trained your mind to be calm, selective, and aware. That's Stoic energy presence in real life. You no longer need to react to everything, no longer feel the urge to prove your worth through performance. You simply show up as you are, calm, composed, magnetic. And ironically, the more you pull back, the more others feel drawn in. They sense something unspoken in you, something they want to understand but can't quite grasp. That feeling is not confusion, it's attraction rooted in depth. The truth is, mystery is not about withholding for effect. It's about knowing that your energy is limited and choosing to protect it from becoming entertainment for others. You don't need to broadcast every thought to be understood. You don't need to overexpress to be respected. The more you practice holding space, the more your silence begins to speak for you. It tells people you're grounded. It shows that you're not reactive, not easily manipulated, not chasing approval. And that steadiness, that quiet boundary, becomes your signature. Because what you hold back doesn't diminish you, it defines you. And in a world overflowing with noise, the one who moves with quiet certainty becomes unforgettable. 7. You don't need to impress, you just need to be solid. We grow up surrounded by the idea that to matter, you must impress. From childhood, we're rewarded for performance. Loud wins, flashy efforts, standout moments. The world keeps reinforcing it. Post your highlights, speak with flair, showcase your value, and collect approval like currency. But while everyone is busy polishing their image, something far rarer and far more powerful is happening in the background. Someone is showing up consistently, doing the work quietly, saying little but delivering much. No theatrics, no exaggerated self-promotion, no desperation to be seen, just a steady presence. And over time, people begin to notice, not because that person tried to be noticed, but because they became the kind of presence others could lean on. That's what being solid looks like. You don't need to impress when you're the one everyone trusts. I once worked with a man like that. He never pushed for attention. He didn't speak in meetings just to be heard. He didn't rush to shake hands or drop credentials into conversations. In fact, he rarely talked about himself at all. But when a deadline came, he delivered. When a problem surfaced, he had already anticipated it. While others were scrambling to appear competent, he was simply competent. That's where real quiet confidence power begins. Not in convincing others of your worth, but in already knowing it and showing it through consistency. He never needed applause to stay motivated. He didn't react to every small shift in the room. He stayed focused, and eventually even the loudest ones turned to him, not because he made noise, but because he was grounded, reliable, solid. The pursuit of constant validation drains you. It ties your self-worth to external feedback. But being solid, unshakable, requires no audience. It's the inner shift that happens when you stop performing and start embodying. This is emotional self-leadership in its rawest form. You do the hard thing not because others are watching, but because it's the right thing. You stay calm under pressure. You keep promises quietly, and you take responsibility without needing credit. People feel that difference. They may not say it out loud, but deep down, they respect it. Because when everything gets unstable, they'll look for the person who never tried to be impressive, just dependable. This is the path of Stoic energy presence, where your power isn't something you announce, but something people sense. It builds slowly, through daily choices, through habits no one sees, through moments where you could show off, but choose to stay centered instead. In relationships, at work, even within your own mind, the shift happens when you stop measuring your worth by how people respond to you and start anchoring it in how you respond to yourself. The solid man doesn't crumble when ignored. He doesn't need instant praise to validate his actions. He leads himself first, and others follow, not because they're dazzled, but because they feel safe in his presence. There's something magnetic about someone who doesn't chase attention, who doesn't panic when overlooked, who doesn't inflate themselves to fill the silence. That kind of inner strength can't be faked. It comes from discipline, from a clear sense of values, and from the deep decision to be consistent, even when no one's watching. In a world that rewards temporary noise, the person who plays the long game, who stays grounded, is the one who ends up being remembered. Not because they impressed everyone, but when things got real, they were the ones who didn't fall apart. You don't need to shine to matter, you just need to stand strong. And if you do, your presence will speak louder than any performance ever could. In a world that celebrates noise, performance, and constant validation, choosing to be calm, detached, and non-reactive is a rare kind of strength. It's not about hiding who you are, it's about mastering who you are. The most magnetic people aren't the loudest. They're the ones who stay grounded when everything else is spinning. By embracing a non-reactive mindset, protecting your peace, and embodying quiet confidence, you stop chasing attention and start commanding presence. Real attraction doesn't come from trying harder. It comes from letting go of the need to impress. Whether through emotional control techniques, magnetic stillness, or simply knowing when to speak and when to hold back, you begin to shift the way people experience you. You become less predictable, more respected, and deeply remembered. So now the question is, where in your life are you reacting too much, giving too much, or seeking too much? Take a step back. Let silence do the talking. Let stillness build your weight. And if any part of this message resonated with you, drop a comment below. Share your story, your moment of calm, your quiet victory. Because sometimes one person's stillness is the reminder someone else needs to finally breathe.